Welcome back, everyone. It is Eric from Rare Candy, and I've got to say, just right out the gate, guys, it feels good to be back. This is my first proper upload on the channel since before Worlds. It's been like almost a month at this point. So yeah, definitely feels to be back home from Japan and back in the swing of things, making videos yet again. I think pretty fittingly today, we're actually going to be looking at what has been winning over in Japan for the month of August. So we're going to be checking out all of the deck lists today over here on PokemonCard.io. They have a ton of deck lists that are probably not even going to be able to cover today. So if you guys want to see all of the deck lists that have been winning for the month of August, I will be sure to link them down below in the description. But we probably aren't going to really touch on Worlds just because I think pretty much everyone knows how Worlds went, and Japan has, you know, what, one other set that wasn't even legal for Worlds. So we're going to be focusing more so on the current and also upcoming format with Obsidian Flames. But with that being said, guys, remember to smack that like button for me, feed that always hungry YouTube algorithm. Let's jump in and check out what's been winning for the month of August. So definitely the theme of this video today, I think it's going to be based around Charizard, really. There's a bunch of Charizard decks winning in Japan, but also there's a lot of weird decks sort of popping up in response to Charizard, which we're going to touch on in a bit as well. But let's check out some of these Charizard lists. This one looks kind of similar to what we have, you know, in the States here, or internationally, I should say. No Pidgeot, though they are still playing the Arceus. The one interesting inclusion they are going with is going to be the Charizard EX from the Pokemon 151 set. So this is a card that we don't yet have right now, but does give the deck potentially, you know, a early game way of taking a big one-shot, since this guy can hit for 330, which means you can actually one-shot an opposing Charizard in the early game without having your opponent taking a lot of prizes. They've cut the Pidgeot, like I said. It looks like favoring the Barrel engine, maybe just to give themselves a few more outs on their path to the peak. They also have the Vengeful Punch, or at least I'm pretty sure that's what this is back here. It looks like that, or maybe Leftovers, but I think it's Vengeful Punch though, but don't quote me on that. So this list here is actually sort of the inverse of the last one we just looked at. So no Arceus, no Barrel, but instead only has the Pidgeot here, which is kind of interesting. But just in general, it's kind of a streamlined list. Again, no extra stage 1 support Pokemon or anything like that. So it looks like they're just sort of beefing up their counts of existing cards. Like, you know, they're maxing out Boss for this particular list here. Looks like they also have the space for something like an Entei as well. But they are playing 10 Fire Energy, which I don't know how much I like this. I've been playing a lot of Charizard lately, and it seems like 8, maybe 9 seems like the most I'd go with. The 10 doesn't seem super necessary to me, but you know, it just increases your odds of starting with it, I guess, or being able to find them when your opponent has like Path to the Peak in play. I don't know. But speaking of Path, they also do have their own for the deck, which I guess could be good in mirror matches too, especially in the late game. If your opponent doesn't have like a second Charizard already built up, you know, you could go knock out Iono Path and maybe try to sweep them at that point. Okay, next up we have what is, I don't know if you want to call it a Charizard deck, but a deck that does play Charizard EX, and that's Mew Max. I'm guessing Charizard's going to be for the mirror matchup, and also maybe for actually opposing Charizard decks as well, because I don't know if you guys have played the Mew Charizard matchup, but it feels incredibly lopsided, to put it lightly. So I guess playing your own Zard does give you a shot in the matchup. And of course, in the mirror match, Charizard's just extremely good. But as you can see, they're not playing any Lisa Sparkles or anything like that. I mean, you do have to cut a lot of stuff out of your deck to make room for a, you know, essentially 6 slots in your deck, the 2/2 Zard plus the 2 candies, and I guess the Fire Energies to go with it. But also some other interesting stuff in the deck. They also are playing the, and I forget the name of this card already, the Town Store or whatever it is, where you can search a tool out of your deck. So that seems kind of cool. You can grab your 4 Sealed Stones in the early game, you know, they're your Vitality Bands. But yeah, this definitely caught my attention for sure. I'm actually curious to just experiment with this and see how it does, but definitely a very unique take on Mew Max that apparently did win over there. Okay, but by far the most interesting, I think, out of all of the Charizard lists that we're looking at today, it's going to be this one. I don't even know what we call this. It's kind of like a Cinderace deck, but not really. It's almost just kind of like a single strike box with a Charizard EX on top of everything. So as you can see, they're playing Cinderace, but they're playing no Score Bunnies or anything like that. Instead, they're getting out all of their Cinderaces with the Single Strike Mustard. So of course, you can only play it if you have it as your last card in hand, but you search your deck for a Single Strike Pokemon, put it in play. They also can get out Beedrill the same way. So the Beedrill can take instant KOs on Pokemon with special energy. So your Mew VMAXs, your Arceus decks, your Lugias, all of that good stuff. Whereas the Cinderace, I believe its base damage is 150 and you can't use the attack on your next turn. But the ability, it does, I believe, 30 extra damage for each prize card your opponent has taken. So in the late game, this guy is hitting for a ton of damage. If they've taken, what, 5 prize cards, you're hitting 300. Seems pretty okay. And they also have not only the single strike energies to increase your damage output, but they have reversal energy to be able to power up, I guess, Cinderace in a single turn as well. And it looks like the whole engine they're using here is using Altaria plus Squavit to be able to get out the Mustard, because you can Altaria, search your deck for the Mustard, put it on top of your deck, squobe it into the single Mustard, and guarantee it as the last card in your hand. And I would assume the Charizard here is just a late game option that you have at your disposal, and it's probably just another way you can power up a Cinderace in a single turn if you need to. I think the only other thing we should probably point out here is they are also playing the, oh man, I forget the name of this tool, but it gives your single strike Pokemon a 300 damage attack. I think it shreds and goes through anything on their Pokemon, or it has you discard 3 energy. It's something like that, but the big takeaway, 300 damage. You can power this thing up with the reversal energy plus your Houndooms to get your last couple of energies on there. So yeah, absolutely crazy deck. I think this thing looks like a ton of fun to play. I don't know if you want to count it as a Charizard deck, but I felt like it'd be worth including in our discussion with some of these other Charizard lists. So before we get into some of like the Charizard counter decks that we've seen pop up a lot in Japan, we're going to go over, I think, some, established archetypes that seem to be getting updated in some interesting ways. So here we have what looks like at a glance a pretty standard Miraidon deck, until you look over here on the right. They're playing 4, not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 copies of Cleffa, as well as a copy of Mew EX. Now, I do think the Mew does make a little bit of sense. It's psychic type, so if you do go against some sort of fighting deck out there, you might be able to hit them for weakness. So I think that does just intuitively make a little bit of sense. Also does give you a little bit of draw with its ability. Just as a refresher, you just draw until you have 3 in hand. But the Cleffa is, I'm assuming it fills 2 purposes here. I guess if you're conceding that you're not going to get an attack off on turn 1, you can just fall back on this attack, just shuffle, no, not shuffle, but just draw until you have 7, I believe is the attack here. But also does have free retreat, so I think this card will fill a similar role as like the Zeraora that we've seen pop up in Miraidon list, where a lot of the time you're just promoting this thing to give yourself free retreat. That way you can use Generator or Flaffy to power up your attacker on the bench and then freely retreat into it. Now, I have no idea if this Cleffa is that good. I don't know if it deserves 4 copies in your deck. I guess maybe it just increases your odds of starting it, but yeah, this seems odd at a glance. But like I said, it did win a tournament, so this might be at least worth messing around with. And I think kind of fittingly, up next, we do have an updated Ting Lu Koraidon deck here. But the interesting thing about this list, well, the first interesting thing is the fact that they are playing the double Solrock and Lunatone combo, because of course, Lunatone's ability will prevent effects of stadiums from affecting your Pokemon if you have Solrock in play. So instead of playing things like Gapejaw Bog or some of the other stadiums that we've seen Ting Lu decks experiment with, they are playing 4 copies of Path, which normally would be pretty annoying for your own deck, but because we do have the Solrock Lunatone, it's actually sort of a one-sided stadium now. So not only is this going to allow you to still use your abilities on things like Alakazam and Koraidon, but also other decks that are playing their own Path to the Peak can no longer disrupt your own deck. Looking at the trainer cards, the one that did catch my eye here is also the copy of Gita, I believe this is. So it just kind of gives you an alternate way of getting your Ting Lus charged up, I'm assuming, in the early game. So maybe if you whiff your Koraidon, you can use Gita to get some energy on your attackers and be ready to go for next turn. Or I guess even just using Gita plus the Koraidon just really sets up your board for, probably the entire game at that point. I would guess this is probably actually the most oppressive way to build Ting Lu. You know, you do lose some of that damage output that you would have from things like Gapejaw Bug, but, you know, maybe the extra disruption from Path is going to be worth it. Alrighty, so next up, Gardevoir looks like it's gotten a few upgrades of its own as well. A lot of this list is going to look, I think, extremely vanilla at a glance. Like, almost none of this looks interesting until we get over to our stadium cards. So don't let this card fool you. This is not Old Cemetery. This is the new, oh man, I forget the name of it already, but it's a new promo stadium card that just came out in Japan where you discard a psychic energy from your hand and heal 30, I believe, from all of your psychic Pokemon, something like that. I really should have done a refresher on this card before I made this video. But yeah, so they're not playing Artisan, no Temple, no nothing like that. So they are basically just trying to tank a little bit better with their Pokemon. And I would imagine this would actually be pretty good in a variety of different cases because, you know, I think Lost Box is like the obvious one where they are gradually sort of just chipping away at your Pokemon with Lost Mine. And this definitely gives you a little bit of an edge in that matchup, but also does allow you to make some, you know, more offensive plays as well. So if you are attacking with your Shining Arcana Gardevoir, well, of course, the big issue with this card is that you're sort of capped at accelerating only 6 energies at a time because you can't accelerate any beyond that without knocking out your Gardevoir. So by playing the new Stadium card, this actually lets you accelerate an extra energy into play and do a little bit more damage, which sometimes is going to be the difference between getting a KO or not. So we actually do have a few different winning Arceus decks we're going to be checking out today. And this is going to be ArcTina, but I don't know if you noticed, but this your boy's deck list over here. So while I was in Japan, I actually played in a few local tournaments over there, and I did wind up winning with ArcTina here. This is actually the same list I played at the World Championships. You know, my Worlds run was okay, not great, but definitely did much better at this local tournament. Got a dub here with the ArcTina. And this list, I think, is really good still. Even after Worlds, I don't think I would change maybe a single card in here. The one interesting thing about the deck, though, is that it does play the double Box of Disaster. You know, a lot of people do play like the one belt, one psychic gloves, or cleansing gloves, whatever it's called, but instead playing the 2 box because it really does help against the Gardevoir matchup, but it's also really good just against a number of different things. I think even going into, you know, the Obsidian Flames format now with Charizard and soon to be like the 151 set, of course, all of which of course were legal over there when I played at this tournament. This actually does help with your Charizard matchup, and just in general is a really good card by being able to place those 8 damage counters whenever your opponent takes a knockout on one of your fully powered up Pokemon V. So I gotta say, it was pretty cool to see my deck list pop up here on this Japanese shops page, and of course have PokemonCard.io post it as well. So kind of a shameless plug, but it was pretty cool, I thought. So getting into our next Arceus concoction here, the rest of these are definitely, I think, a lot more interesting than my ArcTina list. But this one in particular is actually pretty similar to a deck that we've seen start to pop up internationally as well. This is basically kind of like Arcanteleon 2.0, where you're basically an Arceus deck, of course, but you're using Pidgeot now instead of Inteleon to be able to loop Sharon's Care to keep healing your Pokemon whenever they get attacked here. Though this particular list is only playing the 1 Sharon's, so maybe that's actually not a great analogy for this particular list, but the same idea is still present. They also do play the Poppy, which again is becoming sort of a staple in some of these types of Arc Pidgeot decks where you can move your energy over to your Greninja and maybe pull off a Moonlight Shuriken play out of nowhere, which is pretty cool. Or they also are playing the Mew EX, so this does allow you way at attacking with Mew in the same turn as well. And Mew definitely makes sense here because this Arceus deck is pretty good against things that can't one-shot it, but if you do go against, you know, something like an Urshifu that's going to be weak to Psychic, you know, you at least do have a way to respond to those sorts of decks. So I like the Mew inclusion, definitely makes a little bit of sense. They also do have the Shaman here to deal with Charizard EX. And then taking a look at our supporter cards over here, I will say the only one I can't really make out here is going to be this one right in between the Sharons and what looks to be Avery. It could be something like, I'm not sure. To me, it almost looks like Opal, but I know it's not Opal. Maybe this is Raihan, maybe this is Melanie. I think either of those could make sense here. So not exactly sure, guys, but you get the general gist, I think, of this deck list. But next up from there, we're starting to get into some of these Charizard counter decks. We're starting to see a little bit more and more grass get introduced into these deck lists. And this one is definitely an interesting one. It's Umbreon Leafeon VSTAR. Now, one thing I do want to point out actually is if you don't use your VSTAR power with Arceus, you actually have gusting effects with Umbreon, Leafeon VSTAR, and of course, Boss's Orders as well. So I do think that is kind of interesting. So if you can actually manage to avoid having to use Starbirth, you actually do have a lot of really oppressive gusting options at your disposal here. But yeah, it's an Umbreon deck, but instead of playing something like Duraludon or Flying Pikachu, they are opting instead for the Leafeon, which I think does make some sense just because Charizard is kind of a difficult Pokemon to deal with, mainly in the late game. Once you've crossed that, 4 prize threshold, I think it is. They can make quick work of pretty much anything that you have, especially with the right damage modifiers. So Leafeon does give you a way to cleanly one-shot a Charizard EX. The only other interesting card I think I can really spot here is going to be the Sun and Moon badge that we have here. So of course, when this is attached to Umbreon V or V Max, your opponent actually can't use Boss's Orders to bring it up. So that seems pretty cool. But other than that, guys, I mean, it's an Arc deck at its core, but just going all in on the evolutions for this one, apparently. So next up, we have some more Arceus Grass shenanigans with Superior VSTAR. Of course, just to help deal with Charizard. But because they're already playing the grass energy, I definitely like playing the one copy of Leafeon V as well, just because you can use its ability to guarantee an energy attachment on turn 1, which of course is always sort of the big thing with Arceus decks. Now, even though they are playing a pretty hefty amount of water energy here and the Radiant Greninja, I don't think they're actually playing Poppy. I tried to look through these supporters and compare the text on them with the Japanese text on Poppy, and I don't think they're actually playing it, which seems a little bit odd to me, but they're more than likely just using the Greninja to be able to toss away water energies to activate Melanie, because we can see it hiding right back here. Though I don't know if it's necessarily needed, just because you already have the Leafeon V to, help ensure that energy attachment turn 1. But mid-game, it could be good. But then again, you also have the Raihan, so I don't know if the Melanie is needed, but it just adds another way to get Arceus or whoever powered up in the mid-game a little bit quicker. Alrighty, so up next, we have a deck that I'm excited to see win a tournament. That is Torterra. So funny enough, I've actually, at the time of recording, I've been messing around with Torterra a good bit just for fun. I probably don't feel confident enough to bring it to a tournament like this person did, but hey, it definitely paid off for them. But I will say, the Japanese do have one advantage. They actually have a much better Pidgey than we do. They have one with a Call for Family style attack, which we do not, though. It looks like they're still just playing the same Pidgey from Obsidian Flames. Not sure how I feel about that. I feel like if I'm playing Pidgeot and Torterra, I'm 100% playing the Pidgey with the Call for Family attack. So that seems like maybe a little bit of an oversight. Not sure. They also are choosing to tech for the Lost Box matchup. We see the 2 copies of the Pokemon League HQ, which will increase the attack cost of basics by a single energy. So definitely could be good at making things much more difficult on Sableye and late game to come in and start, sweeping your board and picking off all of your low HP basics. They also have a Cleffa, which is, I guess, kind of cool. I don't know if it's needed, just because Turtwig, I believe, has a 2 retreat cost, if I remember right. So unless you're starting with Pidgey, it seems like it's kind of hard to actually use the Cleffa. So I'm actually not sure how much I like this inclusion. But yeah, I'm just backseat deck building at this point, even though I'm not the one who won a tournament with Torterra. They apparently knew what they were doing. But yeah, this would be among one of my, I think, more cuttable cards if I was going to iterate on this list a little bit more. So yeah, Torterra, it's a really slow deck getting going. But now with Pidgeot in the mix, the deck debatably gets a little bit more consistent, and its typing now has become a lot more relevant. So maybe Torterra could be a good pick for maybe some smaller events like league challenges. And I did forget to mention that at the beginning of this video too, guys. These tournaments, these are not like large 3,000 person Champions League events over in Japan. These are much more akin to like a league challenge or like small league cups, tournaments kind of on that size. So that could definitely have a reason for why Torterra was able to do so well at this event. So today for our final deck list we're going to check out, we have a Scovillain EX deck, and admittedly I needed a refresher on what this card did. This is a promo in Japan, and I don't think it's been announced over here in the States and internationally just yet, but I would be willing to bet we're going to get this in Paradox Rift if I just had to guess. But this card is kind of cool. Its first attack is just a single colorless, I think. Does burn and your opponent can't retreat, but more interestingly, its second attack is 2 grass, it does 140. You discard the top card of your opponent's deck, and you discard a card at random from their hand. So it's actually not that bad because 140 is a nice 2-shotting number against a lot of decks. You also hit Charizard for weakness, though I don't know how relevant that's going to be with this particular list since they're not playing any damage modifiers as far as I can see at least. So it looks like the idea here is to just sort of 2-shot everything that you're going to go up against and just sort of annoy your opponent in the process because they have the Crushing Hammers to discard energy. We got the Path to the Peak to shut off abilities on Rulebox Pokemon. We also have the 2 copies of Snatch Arm. And this card I think definitely makes sense here too, just because you look at your opponent's hand, you take a Pokemon you find there and put it at the bottom of their deck. So you can go Snatch Arm, or let's say you Judge first. Go Judge, Snatch Arm, put a Pokemon on the bottom, and then discard another card from your opponent's hand. And yeah, you're basically just trying to limit their options and prevent them from playing the game. I believe this card down here with this like honeycomb looking pattern, I'm pretty sure this is going to be the tool card that reduces damage to your stage 1s by 30. So it definitely makes sense. Again, like I said, this deck is playing the 2-shot game, so you just want to make sure you can actually survive 1-hit KOs from Pokemon. I'm not sure what this card right next to it is. It looks like these are all Pokemon tools, so this actually could be a Defiance ban, so maybe this is going to be a way they can one-shot Charizard. But yeah, I think the deck looks pretty cool. Definitely reminds me of kind of like a new age Malamar VMAX. Definitely that same sort of energy here. Definitely will be curious to see if this can find any success like Malamar did, but is pretty cool. And if nothing else, is going to be very annoying to go up against. But yeah, guys, that's going to do it for all of the deck lists we're going to be checking out today. These are only a small fraction of all the ones that won for the month of August. So like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, if you want to see all of the deck lists that won, I will link those down below in the description over at PokemonCard.io. And be sure to let me know what is your favorite deck that we checked out in today's video. But if you guys did enjoy today's content, as always, remember to leave a like on the video. Or if you're feeling a little extra generous, you can always become a patron at patreon.com/rarecandytcg or pick up some merch at rarecandytcg.com. But as always, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.